How's it going, Skullbrains? It's time to find out how our heroic trio escaped the freezing ice ambush in the next issue of The Ancestral Trail.
When he, who is the chosen one, shall tread upon the ancient path, and battle there to overcome
the forces of the dark.
The Ancestral Trail, an epic story of myths, magic, and monsters. Book 20, Spector, Keeper of the Ice Kingdom, trapped in the wastes of Frigoria.
In the last episode, Richard, Orkin, and Melik find themselves trapped at the bottom of the ocean by Nemes, the Merman King. Given the ability to breathe underwater by two captured guardians of the ancestral world, Nemes is soon destroyed. Then, on the back of Duna, a dolphin who came to their aid in the battle against Nemes, the three travellers head towards Frigoria in search of the next life force pod. However, they soon find themselves trapped by impeding ice. Let's find out how they escape. But before we do, let's go over the Ancestral Challenge for this issue. Be on the hunt for Shumi and Shubi. Hopefully they are easier to spot in this issue. Also, keep an eye out, pun intended, you'll see what I mean, for Spector's eyeball hidden somewhere in the illustrations. As for Morbane's Monsters and Magic Challenge, in the pinned comment you'll find a link to download this week's cards. Watch the episode, have a read, and see if you can guess who Spector is based on. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think, and, in the next issue, I'll reveal the answer. As for Nemes, if you guessed he was based on the Sirens, you were correct. Alright, you ready? Let's do this.
On the 20th day, Seer of Ice Chill best is fled, by cutting that which in a head is single, cold, and seeing all, the eye that holds you in its thrall. A blinding arc destroys the past. Then they start the trip at last. Beware at length a fall of snow. Another city far to go.
The ice creaked closer on either side. Suddenly, the dolphin leaped out of the water and gave a mighty flick of his tail, catapulting the trio onto the ice. Then Duna sped down between icy cliffs to the clear sea below and began to work his way under the pack ice to the safety of the open ocean. The three picked themselves up from the hard ground. The waterways through which they had travelled were now frozen over, and the pack ice stretched cold and glittering in all directions. Richard took out the Pathfinder. The arrow pointed towards the cliffs that loomed in the distance. The journey was harder than any of them expected. The pack ice was a tortured mass of knobbly outcrops and sudden crevices. Despite Duna's oil, they were soon shivering as cold seeped into their bones. By the time the three reached the cliffs, they were exhausted. With a supreme effort, they managed to clamber up the rugged heights to the plateau at the top. Before them, rising like a ship from the flatness, was Frigoria. Shimmering walls of ice glinted in the sunlight, and spires rose to a clear blue sky. It was like walking into a fairy tale, except for one ominous reminder of the Evil One's presence. Set into the walls was a monumental arch. It was built of gritty ice that contained vague, twisted lumps. As the three got nearer, the lumps turned into distinguishable creatures. Here they made out a tail, there an eye. Cold mouths gaped wide in silent fear. Either side of the arch, dolphins were frozen in agony, their faces grey masks of terror. In silence, the three tramped through the arch into the city of ice. Streets stretched out in every direction, straight and empty. Where the rooftops had shone in the sun, these pristine avenues were cold, dark, and unwelcoming. icy slabs of pavement led like blue slides into the gloom as the three stepped into the stark environment. The cold was biting deep into their bones, and already Melik was beginning to stumble with fatigue. Richard was about to suggest they rest for a while when Melik suddenly slumped down to the floor. Richard grabbed Melik by the collar and tried to haul him up. Then a shadow fell over him, obliterating what little light came into that dreary street. Richard looked up and gasped. Above them loomed a giant. He was thickly bearded and clad in rough woolen clothes to insulate him against the cold. In the middle of his forehead sat a single blue-grey eye that stared expressionlessly at Richard.
Welcome to Fregoria,
the creature boomed. He advanced towards the shivering trio, then scooped them up into his massive arms. Numbed by the cold and paralyzed by terror, the three lost consciousness. When Richard came to, he found himself lying in a vast chamber of ice. At the far end on a silvery throne sat the giant, his single eye staring piercingly out of its rubbery socket. Richard was so hypnotized by the eye that it took a moment for him to realize that he was no longer cold. In fact, he felt warmer than he had for a long time. Looking down, he saw that he was wrapped in a hairy blanket made of the same material as the giant's clothes. Next to him lay Orkin and Melik, both awake and similarly swathed. "Who are you?" Richard asked.
I am Spector, keeper of the Ice Kingdom.
The giant replied in a deep, gravelly voice.
This is my palace. Enjoy it before I take you to the Evil One.
Spector raised a hand to his forehead. There was a squelching noise, then the eye was in his fist, leaving a raw, gaping socket. He put it by his side in a glass jar filled with clear, green liquid. Then he grunted.
Don't try and escape, and don't think that because I'm asleep, my eye can't see you.
A few seconds later, the room echoed to the sound of heavy snoring. Richard, Orkin and Melik stared at the eye as it floated in its green fluid. The eye stared, unblinking, back at them. If they moved, it followed them, swiveling in its container. For an experiment, Richard took a few steps towards it. Instantly, Spector's hand twitched out towards the jar. As Richard retreated, so did the giant's hand. Richard turned his back on the eye and motioned Melik and Orkin towards him. "Listen," he said. "The eye can see whatever we do, so from now on we must find a way of blocking its view." After a second's reflection, he added, "First we should look at the Book of Prophecies to see if there's any clue in there." Melik unstrapped the book and started to turn the ancient pages. "Face the other way," Richard warned the little scribe quickly. "We mustn't let the eye see the text." The three scanned the verse while Spector's eye bobbled watchfully in its jar. "We have to get the eye," Richard said. Then he read the verse aloud to the others. "Seer of ice chill best is fled by cutting that which in a head is single cold and seeing all, the eye that holds you in its thrall. A blinding arc destroys the past, then they start the trip at last. Beware at length the fall of snow, another city, far to go." "Well, how?" Melik asked as he closed the book. "We can't get near it without Spector waking up." "Both of you huddle closer, as if we're in deep conversation," Richard whispered after a moment's thought. "I want to be completely hidden from that eye." Orkin and Melik moved around so that the eye could see nothing but their backs. When Richard was sure he was out of sight, he raised the hood of Golan's tunic and shimmered into invisibility. Richard moved towards the jar. The first few steps were nerve-wracking. He expected Spector to jump forward at any moment, but his plan was working. The eye stared straight through him as he crept closer and closer to the jar. Soon Richard was standing right by the throne. He drew a deep breath and lifted the container. Then he lost his grip. The jar flew out of Richard's grasp. As the lid bounced loose, a thick gel slopped onto the ice and the eye rolled away. Spector bent over in agony. Both hands clutched to his forehead. The jelly-like liquid was sizzling, melting a channel into the ice as it spread. Without its protective liquid, the eye had begun to shrivel. Richard pulled back the hood of his tunic. "Let's go!" he shouted to the others. The three sprinted for the only door they could see. Behind them, Spector stumbled in pursuit. the companions burst into a gigantic hall whose walls, floor and ceiling were made up of polished ice sheets that reflected their forms 1,000-fold. The trio's tormentor smashed through the door behind them. Within seconds, the three had lost all sense of direction. Their reflections bounced out at them from every angle. It was impossible to tell where they had come from and where they should be going. "Keep behind me," Richard ordered. "I'm going to make for a wall and feel along it until I find a door. Whatever you do, don't get separated." With Orkin and Melik on his heels, Richard shuffled warily away from the center of the hall. As he did so, the reflections shifted, as if they were trapped in an enormous kaleidoscope. Soon Richard's outstretched hand encountered the burning chill of ice. At last, he had reached a wall. Richard fumbled along it as fast as he could, his fingers becoming numb. He wondered how long he could keep it up. Suddenly his hand met empty space. He stepped into the opening. It was a doorway. His reflection greeted him on all sides save one, where he saw a dark, rough-hewn corridor. He headed for it and felt rough stone beneath his fingertips. The three broke into a run. Suddenly, the tunnel opened onto a dark street. They had escaped. The three darted into the dark city, skidding and sliding on icy pavements. They had reached another arch with sea mammals trapped inside, just like the one they had first entered, when they heard a terrifying roar of anger. Spector had emerged from the palace and was striding after them. "I've got an idea," Orkin said. "You two go through. Melik, give me your rope." He seized the rope, tied a loop in one end, and threw it up over one of the battlements that lined the city wall. Then he scrambled up and positioned himself atop the arch. He drew his sword, repositioned the rope on a battlement directly in the center of the arch. Then he squatted and waited. The sound of their voices gave Spector both speed and direction. He strode towards them, his arms outstretched, until they made contact with the arch. He pounded it with his fists, sending shockwaves through the ice. Then he stooped under the arch. With one end of the rope looped around the battlement and the other tied round his waist, Orkin launched himself into space. He swung in a perfect arc towards the giant's face, and his sword struck just where he planned, in Spector's eyeless socket. The blade plunged deep into tender flesh, then withdrew. The dead giant toppled slowly backwards. "Look what's happening to the city!" Melik cried. With Spector's death, Frigoria had started to melt fast, as though a gigantic furnace had been lit beneath it. The tall spires dissolved into shapeless lumps. Within a short time, the meltdown had spread to engulf the walls and the archway of imprisoned sea mammals. Richard, Orkin and Melik watched in joy as the animals plunged into the pool of water that was now all that remained of Spector's domain. Whale song mixed with the chatter of dolphins as the creatures celebrated their freedom. "If I'm right," Melik said, "this meltdown will have gone right through the ice cap. The sea mammals will be able to swim out to open water and join up with Golan's forces." Sure enough, after a few moments of boisterous tail slapping and water jetting, the mammals disappeared from view. All that remained on the lake was the bobbing carcass of Spector himself. Richard checked the Pathfinder, and the three moved off in the direction it indicated. For a while the going was easy. The sun shone, the ground was hard and flat, the air clear. Soon in the distance, they made out a mountain range. They trampled over the light snow with renewed vigor, their eyes fixed only on the clear, white mountains ahead. When the blizzard struck them from behind, the three were completely unprepared. A wall of freezing darkness hit them, shot through with lightning streaks and driven onwards by a fearsome gale. At a stroke, visibility dropped to nil. The blue sky was suddenly obscured by a cloud of pitch darkness. The temperature plummeted, and ice particles lashed against their faces. "Keep close!" Richard shouted. Already the other two were lost from sight or sound. He was stranded in a blizzard of snow and ice that encompassed his entire universe. Covering his face as best he could, he plunged alone into the storm. And that is the end of book number 20, which means we only have 6 more to go. So, how did you go with the Ancestral Challenge? Shumi and Shubi were here on page 317. And did you keep an eye out for Spector's eyeball? It was here on the top of the arch of page 307. Don't forget you can download Morbane's monsters and magic cards in the pinned comment to see if you can guess who Spector was based on. Also in this issue there were 2 map pieces and 3 letter tokens to collect. We're getting close to solving that Power of Evil challenge. Thanks for watching, and please, if you are liking these videos, please hit that like and subscribe button and ring the little bell icon. It will really help the channel out. And, as always, until next time, stay tuned, stay skull-brained.